Nigel, I was on LinkedIn last week, I think it was, and I asked a question about uh, citizen data scientists, and I'm hoping we can explore that a little bit more in this short conversation. But before we do that, before we jump in, should we share a little bit more about ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So between us, Sean, whether you've counted them up, we have more than 40 years experience of working at Microsoft, and probably a lot more than that in the industry, actually. But both of us, when we're at Microsoft, work with global organizations, working on their transformation and innovation programs. But both now kind of moved on from Microsoft, and pursuing kind of careers independently. But in the last few weeks, decided to come together to form Awaken AI, which is just a small consultancy. And our aim, I guess, is to guide organizations ethically to realize the benefits of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So let's just get straight to the nub of it, Nigel, because we want to keep this quite short and sweet for everybody. So, citizen data scientists, can you help me define what it is, please?
Yeah, well, hopefully, hopefully we can during the course of this. I think before we do, probably what we need to do is just talk a little bit around what a data scientist does, before we talk about the citizen data scientist. And I guess, my favorite definition, is a somewhat humorous one, and that is that a data scientist spends 80% of their time wrangling or manipulating data, and then the other 20% of their time moaning about the fact that they have to wrangle or manipulate data. So I guess they are big data wranglers. They gather information, they analyze it, they model it using algorithms, and at the end of it, they create insights that can lead to impact in business change. And I guess a real summary is they turn data into a business impact.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, I've researched it and I understand that. I think it's well known out there now. But citizen data scientists, that's something different. Then, are they a modern day replacement for the data scientist? Is that role gone away?
No, so the role definitely hasn't gone away. And I think one of the challenges that organizations have with data scientists, is that they're kind of like the rock stars of the 21st century. They're very few and far between, and they're highly paid. So the citizen data scientist is something different, and they definitely don't replace. They definitely don't replace data scientists, but they kind of augment them, to use that term, if I may, or kind of help organizations get additional value. So I suppose, what they are from my experience, and, I've spent the last sort of 4 or 5 years working with professional services customers. And within kind of professional services or in large enterprises, they tend to be people that are sat within the business, that don't necessarily have a lot of technical skills in the same way as a data scientist would. But they know how to use kind of like everyday tools like Excel and things like that. And the value that they can add is they know the business well, they know the data quite often quite well, and they can be the first people to kind of get involved with some of that data wrangling or data, taking the data and getting some kind of manipulation to it to get it in a format that we can start to ask good questions of it. So they sit within the business, and they are a business person, that use everyday tools in order to perform some of the data science functions.
Right. Okay. So I think if I've got this right, so citizen, is still valid in the context of citizen data scientist. It just referring to anyone can do this, and it's anyone with a passion and knowledge for the subject area that they are doing some work within, and it's about making impact, right? It's about someone in the business who wants to have impact through the work that they're doing. So they use the same sort of tools as the data scientists do.
So no, the data scientists tend to use, they're kind of creating algorithms at the end of the day. So they're using kind of programming tools like Python and R, which people may have kind of heard of but not used. But the citizen data scientist, as I say, they'll use tools that are kind of everyday. So in the kind of Microsoft world, that would be things like, Power BI or Excel, tools like that have kind of embedded artificial intelligence in them, in order to help them do some of the data manipulation. So they're using kind of everyday tools that have AI embedded in them in order to be able to perform some of those functions.
But is this different from people looking at data from a reactive perspective, just doing insights from an analysis perspective? Is it more than that?
Yeah, I guess, well, whether you're a citizen data scientist or whether you're a data scientist, you still suffer from the same problem. And that is that, when you're trying to make sense of data, there's a lot of it, more nowadays generated than we're able to kind of capture a lot of the time. And it's coming from a lot of different sources. And it does tend to be reactive. So you're looking at kind of historic data that you've been capturing from multiple sources. And then a lot of that, the role, whether it be citizen or data scientist, is about kind of how you aggregate that data and get it to a point that you can start to manipulate it. But the real value comes from actually proactively seeking data. So deciding what data you want in advance and capturing it and trying to capture it in a clean way so that, the 80%, in the kind of joke that I talked about earlier on of somebody's time, just kind of, manipulating the data, that becomes a much lower kind of percentage of time in order to be able to do it.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Nigel. So one of the last points I just want to get my head around a little bit, it's a bit of concern more than needing absolute clarity. But, Awaken AI, our partnership together and how we came together is, underpinned by, ethics and bias within some of the data sets and the individuals that are looking at the data sets. So these are concerns that go side by side with this whole conversation that we're talking about here. I'm aware, because I used to work in the industry, but I'm also aware through research that, organizations, are either looking at or have started to have, data policies in place. They may have governance frameworks in place for artificial intelligence and data science, for example. Do we think that, everything's covered?
Well, you'd like to hope that it is, and I think you're right. Many large organisations do have those policies in place, and I think if I was to be controversial, I'd say for a lot of those organisations, it's because they have to. They have to have those policies in place because they're mandated to have them, and not necessarily because they want to. And I guess part of the reason that we're working together is I'd like to see all businesses and all organisations actually want to kind of do the analysis of this data in an ethical and an unbiased way. So moving from that kind of point of kind of being told that they have to do it to a point that they actually want to do it.
So this is an opportunity for a citizen data scientist to help out, right?
Oh, absolutely it is. Yeah. I think, the citizen data scientist is actually, in a place to address those concerns. And I think your definition, when we started talking about this, of what the citizen is, was different to mine, because I was talking about somebody in a business and you're talking about, people kind of anywhere and everywhere. And I think that's exactly the right way to try and address some of these biases. The more diverse set of people that we have, whether that be from ethnic background, whether it be culturally, whatever, geographically, the more people that we have involved in kind of helping to look at some of these data sets and kind of come up with solutions, then the better the solutions would be. And I guess the analogy is that, some of this, it's like looking in a mirror, and the artificial intelligence or the algorithm is just mirroring back our own biases. So if you have, a particular set of people that are kind of looking to create those algorithms, and they always come from a particular background, then they will always be biased in a certain way. Whereas the more diverse set of people that we can get involved with this and be part of it, then the better the outcomes are for everybody in terms of, the analysis of the data.
Yeah, it has to be a good thing. So I think, let's just summarize a few points here, Nige, and then we'll wrap it up, if we may. So, I think we've got a broad understanding as to what a citizen data science is, and that is, quite frankly, anybody can be a citizen data scientist. But there are still some open questions, concerns, depending on how I want to position it, around the ethics and the bias, but also the opportunity that it has for people to start thinking about and raise their knowledge around the sort of questions that need to be asked around the ethics and the bias of the data that they're working with. And perhaps we can follow that up in a future conversation over the next few weeks or so.